Hello again, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. Hazardous weather graphic, much reduced from what's been the last couple of days. All the warnings, advisories that were out from the northern panhandle yesterday up into the northern interior of Alaska all ended now, and a high surf advisory remains out for actually the north shore of St. Lawrence Island, with winds gusting 50 miles an hour today, expected to continue to gust 40 to 50 miles an hour. So that advisory's out through tonight, actually tonight through Monday, and due to end at 6 p.m. Monday afternoon. And so the high surf, due to the winds, will continue to possibly cause minor beach erosion. Moving on to the, there we go, satellite imagery here. You can see a front pushing its way eastward. Pretty good wind flow, making a pretty good jog all the way up. Now looks like it's crossed Kodiak Island. Actually, rain tapering off at Kodiak State Airport today after picking up about 2/10 of an inch. So really, this system not much of a precipitation producer and already starting to fall apart here. And rolling that through again, see most of the boundary was up just north of the Aleutians. Areas of snow showers tracking westward here from Shemya to Adak, Atka, on up into Unalaska, and conditions tapering off a little bit now along the Alaska Peninsula area. Otherwise, to the east, we had the system moving northward and now taking a turn to the northeast, came up off the Gulf of Alaska last night, and so clearing out with some sunshine here across south central Alaska, Prince William Sound, and rather fair conditions, possibly a few breaks here up into the Kuskokwim Valley and the lower Yukon River Valley areas. But any precipitation up here, really pretty light amounts in the last 12 hours, really nothing more than a few hundredths of an inch to maybe a tenth of an inch water equivalent. So pretty light conditions now, and heavier precipitation though occurring along the southeast coast. You can see low pressure here scooting northward. We did have a pretty good frontal boundary move through overnight last night, produced some pretty good winds in some locations, but anywhere from up to 2/3 of an inch falling across the southern southeast coast during the afternoon today, or during the day from the 12-hour period in at 3 p.m. this afternoon, with Craig and Shelter Cove picking up closer to an inch and roughly a quarter to a third of an inch over the central southeast coast, but up to the north, again, approaching that 1 inch mark, depending on where you are, especially up toward the Klondike Highway, even heavier amounts than that. Juneau this afternoon, moderate rain, winds east-southeast gusting 46 miles per hour, and once that pushes through, that'll start to improve here this evening. Snow showers towards the Yakutat area, ending at Cordova, tapering off at Valdez after picking up a couple inches of snow overnight, and some scattered snow showers here along the Alaska Range, diminishing as well. And an area of light snow up here over the north slope on out to the eastern Arctic coast. Snow reported Nuiqsut all the way over to Barter Island, and some snow showers into the Koyukuk Valley, scattered snow showers, light snow showers here of Nulato Hills up in towards Selawik, Kotzebue Sound, and winds continue to gust 50 miles an hour at Point Hope today through the Bering Strait, and as I mentioned, for St. Lawrence Island, with continuous snow falling there throughout the afternoon. Out to the west, low pressure up into the southeast Bering here with that weakening occluded front across the Bristol Bay area, into Kodiak with some mixed rain and snow there, and areas of light snow across Bristol Bay. Pretty good snow actually coming down at Dillingham there as that front currently moves through, and also snow for the Perblofts. Otherwise, snow showers along the Aleutians, a little more steadier here toward Adak and Atkin, advance of that low center. But you can see light winds and a break right through here from the Yukon Delta into south central Alaska. Take a look at tonight's forecast. The break behind the trough tonight, or you get this evening, later this evening, will move through pretty quickly. Next system, southerly flow, jet stream carrying it right up to the north. So rain and wind increase again along the southeast coast after midnight, late tonight, and toward morning, with increase in precipitation depending on your, well, be rain along the coast and then up to the north, higher elevations in the form of snow. And chance of rain or snow right along the outer coastline of the North Gulf Coast. Could be either way there. Anything inland or with elevation will be in the form of snow, but it looks pretty light at this point. This frontal boundary really falling apart here, so it hasn't been much of a precipitation producer, and it'll even become probably less of one tonight. A couple of low centers here over the southeast Bering, one into Bristol Bay, and that'll produce snow and breezy conditions for the Alaska Peninsula, Bristol Bay, and maybe a better chance of snow here for the southern Kuskokwim Valley into Kuskokwim Delta, dry over the Yukon Delta to the Seward Peninsula. Pretty good conditions with clearing and light winds over the central interior areas, decreasing snow showers from Eagle northward, ending at Arctic Village. And occasional light snow persists, mainly along the Arctic coast and to a lesser extent in the North Slope. And most offshore flow here, that'll keep most of this precipitation offshore, although there could be a few flurries there, Point Hope, Cape Lisburne, but if you get it, it won't amount to much at all. And again, the 40 to 50 mile an hour wind gusts continue for St. Lawrence Island. And actually a stronger push of cold air coming down again as this system moves eastward. The colder air back out here will kind of reorient itself and come southward as the gradient shifts around. We'll see for tomorrow. Now we got north to north-northwest winds, so definitely snow showers and temperatures below freezing for the Perblofts, and that'll extend right on down to the eastern Aleutians. And pretty tight gradient here with snow and blowing snow, temperatures in the mid to upper 20s for the Alaska Peninsula. And could see gusts over 60 miles an hour here coming out of the bays on the Pacific side of the peninsula. Light winds, periods of snow over Bristol Bay, chance of snow showers Kodiak Island, and then this low tracking northeastward here towards Yakutat. That'll bring a chance of snow, best chance Prince William Sound on up to Valdez, maybe Cordova before it mixes to moderate to heavy rain, Yakutat. Otherwise, looks like that will cut off right along the Chugach Mountains, so don't look for any precipitation in eastern Cook Inlet from Anchor Point on up to Palmer, and maybe a few snow showers in the Susitna Valley, but pretty light, dry over the interior, a little breezy along the Brooks Range, and strong winds, rain moderate to heavy at times ahead of this system, pushing into the Panhandle. That moves through into Canada, and good westerly flow across the Pacific keeps it wet. Rain with that next trough slamming into the, or hitting the Panhandle broadside there. Rain in the south, snow in the north, periods of snow across the North Gulf Coast, and a chance of into the Copper River Basin. Probably see some snow showers there. Swath of snow likely here from the northeast interior into the mid-Tanana Valley or the mid-interior, and numerous showers, widespread light snow showers here from, well, actually possibly Kodiak Island, definitely the Bristol Bay area, and back to the west coast there. Stays breezy, but maybe not quite as strong on the wind, St. Lawrence Island. Pretty good chance of snow there. It stays quite windy up here, western Brooks Range along mountains out to the coast. And lessening wind and periods of light snow for the Alaska Peninsula back to the Perblofts. Next system spreads snow or snow and rain into the western Aleutians, but right now it looks like the gradient, the strongest winds will stay off to the south. And looking at low temperature forecast for tonight, minus teens below zero, all of the Arctic coast, and a little below zero for the Brooks Range. Single numbers, central interior, actually Tanana Valley, 40 mile country, zero at Tok, not Northway, maybe Northway too. -2 Fort Yukon, mid-20s for the Perblofts, mid-30s for the Aleutians to the Fox Islands, and upper 20s to mid-30s for the Alaska Peninsula. Lows forecast in the 20s here, south central Alaska area, and upper 30s, mid to upper for the Panhandle. Highs for tomorrow, lower to mid 40s for the southeast coast, mid to upper 20s to lower 30s south central Alaska, and milder along the coast, like Seward could be 38. Otherwise, teens Copper River Basin, teens to lower 20s, upper Tanana Valley, single numbers to a little to lower teens, northern interior, Brooks Range single numbers, staying below 0 on the Arctic coast, 29 the high for St. Paul, 15 for Savunga, lows down into lower 20s for the Pribilofs. Otherwise, about the same, low temperature wise over the Arctic coast north slope, single numbers interior, single numbers into the Kuskokwim Delta, 30s for the Panhandle, highs below 0 along the Arctic coast to lower 30s here to near 40 on the North Gulf Coast.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
A lot of IFR here over the western interior from Bristol Bay right on up and actually across the Brooks Range, Koyukuk Valley, Kobuk-Selawik Valley out to the Chukchi Sea and then up to the central eastern Arctic coast. And a narrower band down here along the Alaska Range up and, well, actually right along the Alaska Range and coming down to the Talkeetnas and Prince William Sound eastward on into the northern Panhandle. Afternoon forecast, that pretty much holds here across southern Alaska, becomes more widespread. All of the southeast coast now, IFR tomorrow afternoon, a little bit up there over the west central Brooks Range, or just on the north side of the Brooks Range there, mostly on the north slope in that area, with IFR, Seward Peninsula, in down across eastern Norton Sound, and marginal VFR improves to VFR out here, Adak and Atka and Amchitka. Then for Tuesday morning, this area holds pretty much stationary up there on the north slope of IFR, and IFR swath there from the Bering Strait, north side of St. Lawrence Island, east-southeast across the interior, and right on down about the Talkeetnas there, maybe into the Matanuska Valley, and then along the North Gulf Coast, in across the northern and eastern Panhandle with marginal VFR into the Gulf, VFR east side of Kodiak Island, and marginal VFR northern eastern Bering Sea, Bristol Bay, Alaska Peninsula, continuing to improve. VFR widespread across the Aleutians. And for Tuesday afternoon, that pattern pretty much stays, so a pretty good day here for the Aleutians, becoming marginal again, Chimney and Attu. Marginal Alaska Peninsula, IFR on the increase here over the central interior, right up to the north slope, eastward across the upper Tanana Valley 40-mile country, and then southeastward here to the North Gulf Coast, eastern Panhandle, passes. Anatuvik, marginal VFR becoming VFR. And same trend for Adigan as well. Looks like improving conditions throughout the day to VFR in the afternoon. Lake Clark and Merrill, occasional marginal VFR tomorrow. And for Monday, rainy, looks occasionally IFR. And for windy, marginal VFR, but pretty good there on the northern entrance, tad lower here on the south side. And for Isabel, occasionally marginal. Mintasta, VFR, could be some marginal VFR. If there is, it'll be on the southern approach. And Tanita, marginal VFR. Portage, IFR, sure bet. And for Chilkoot and White, IFR. Freezing levels, again, we're on the cold side of the jet now, so 2,000 feet here, still have some southerly jet here, 2,000 feet in over the southeast coast, but the higher freezing levels well off to the south at the surface, right along the coastline down to the Aleutian Range, and then cutting back across the Pribilofs, southern Bering Sea. Icing could be a little bit of isolated moderate, most likely may even be isolated light out here over the southwest interior across Bristol Bay. Heavier icing, southeast coast here. Could be some areas of considerable moderate all along the Panhandle up to Yakutat, maybe even over toward Cordova, then tapering off as you head in toward the Kenai Peninsula. Jet stream, cold upper low here tracking eastward into Bristol Bay. That'll slowly move eastward over 24 hours beyond this into Tuesday and then lift up across southern Alaska. So that's going to keep us on the cold side of the jet down here well to the south, 170 knots. Still tomorrow, southerlies about 90 into the Panhandle, but this will track through. So the upcoming week, anything that falls will be in the form of snow even down across southern Alaska. And the 9,000-foot wind flow chart looking like this. Very strong winds here across the panhandle, 50 to 65 knots and 40 to 50, 30 knots east-southeast along the North Gulf Coast, Cook Inlet. Lighter here through this trough axis, mostly southerly, not too strong over the interior. And northwesterlies 35, eastern Aleutians diminishing as you head west. 3,000 feet, we've got north 30 become northwest 40 across the eastern Aleutians, and really light winds out over the western central Aleutians. And we've got southeasterlies, east-southeasterlies, not too bad, 15 to 20, and strong winds here with this low kicking northward up off the coast of the Panhandle. So 50 to 60 knot winds overspreading the area during the day tomorrow. With that, moderate chop from Dixon Entrance northward across, well, to Yakutat, and then over to possibly Cordova. Also moderate chop along the Alaska Peninsula. And after the break, I will return with a look at the marine forecasts.
Good evening, and thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, joined again by Eric Stevens of GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And Eric, thanks so much for joining us again tonight.
Happy to be here, Dave.
Thanks, Eric. And we've been talking about the complex gathering of information from satellites, looking down on the surface of the planet, and some of those orbits around the planet work for Alaska and some of them don't. There's a lot of challenges with those. How can we get better imagery for the poles and specifically for Alaska?
Right. Well, today we're going to talk about a very interesting kind of satellite orbit that has potential to be real helpful for the high latitudes.
Okay.
Especially us here in Alaska. Canadians, Russians, Norwegians will all be interested in this. The satellites are not in orbit yet. Now the future is uncertain, but it's possible, and if this happens, it will be wonderful for Alaska. Okay. It's called the highly elliptical orbit.
Oh, that sounds
it's interesting. Yeah. And I think first, to help our discussion, we should get back to some of Kepler's laws and how do satellites work.
Sure.
Kepler's first law, an orbit of a planet around a sun or a weather satellite around the Earth is not necessarily a circle, it's an ellipse.
Okay.
And the highly elliptical orbit takes advantage of this aspect. We're going to put the Earth in one of the ellipse and then stretch one of the foci of the ellipse and then stretch that ellipse out real far to make it highly elliptical.
The foci is that bend part of the end of the ellipse. If you're going to stretch out a rubber band, that would be the center, kind of the stretchy part.
Yes.
Ends. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And then Kepler's second law says that the closer something is to the thing that it's orbiting, the faster it goes.
Okay.
We see this in the solar system, that Mercury flies around the sun real fast. Jupiter, much slower. Jupiter's further away, it's slower. Mercury's closer in, it's faster. This happens with weather satellites too. Even satellites like the International Space Station, it's pretty close to the Earth. It goes around the Earth in only 90 minutes. Okay. That thing is moving. It's only 250 miles away. So how can we take advantage of these two aspects of Kepler's laws of motion to get better weather surveillance of Alaska? And this highly elliptical orbit is going to be the approach. So we have with us today our friendly planet Earth and our simulated satellite, the lid off of this salt shaker
like
here.
Sputnik there. Yeah.
There it is. It's shiny, it's metal, it's space-worthy. And what we want to be able to do is, could you have a satellite hover over the top of the world, up over Alaska? You can't really do that. Geostationary satellites have to be over the equator. Okay. So how could we almost solve this? And this is the tricky part. Maybe should we tilt the Earth over?
Focus on the pole. That's what we're trying to accomplish here, right?
So here we have the northern side of the planet, and we're going to trace out the orbit of a satellite with this salt shaker lid here. Now imagine a highly elliptical orbit. So let's put the Earth in one of the foci of the ellipse, and we'll have an imaginary foci out here. So the satellite will not go in a circle around the Earth, but will be in this long strung out ellipse. So the satellite will go...
Kind of like a racetrack.
Yes, there you go, like a racetrack. So it's an oval elliptical shape like that. And notice now that when the satellite's over here, we've got a nice view of the northern hemisphere around. There's Alaska, Russia, Canada, Greenland, all there. So that's the ellipse aspect of an orbit, Kepler's first law. The second law saying that when you're further away as a satellite, you go slower. And this we can take real
okay.
advantage of. Because the way this orbit works, when the satellite goes over Antarctica here,
Right.
it's going to be close to the Earth. It's
Okay.
going to be moving, whoosh, goes on by. And then as it comes out here, it will slow down. This increases what is known as the dwell time. The satellite will just hang here looking for hours at Alaska and the high Arctic. And then eventually it will come around and it will accelerate and whiz around the South Pole and then come back and hang here for a while because it's further away from the planet. It goes slower.
Yeah.
It has to. That's the laws of motion. And such like that, repeating.
Wow.
Now, the real important way to make this work is you have to have two satellites. So that while one is whipping around the pole, you've got the other one out here, and they work as a team. You could then get a series of images of Alaska that can be almost from a a constant frame of reference.
Right.
And you can loop them together to make movies. You can take a picture every 10 minutes, say, of Alaska, and then loop it, playing it at several frames a second. You could see the clouds whiz on by. You know, the Weather Channel, weather broadcasters in the lower 48 especially can show these movie loops from the geostationary satellites. In Alaska, we've never really been able to do that very well, especially in the higher, most northern parts of the state, because those geostationary satellites are over the equator. It's not a good view. And this highly elliptical orbit whipping around the South Pole and then dwelling up here would be a way for us to get that constant frame of reference and do really good weather surveillance over the Arctic, seeing where those storms are, where they're going. Nothing quite like a movie loop of the weather in time to really illustrate what's important, what's going on.
And compared to what we have right now, we just have small windows or snapshots of what's going on with the polar orbiters. We don't have that long range view that's looking top down to give us that complete motion picture that helps us understand so much of the atmosphere at this
There's
point.
so many different kinds of satellites. Each has their advantage. Each is important, and the highly elliptical orbit satellite will also fit into that scheme. It's a nifty idea to solve an Alaskan challenge.
That's fantastic. Well, that sounds really exciting. And again, kind of a satellite dream of the future to come. Okay, very good. Thanks for joining us today, Eric. We really appreciate the information. And if you'd like to learn more about what Eric does at Dehne, at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, we invite you to visit the web address that you see on your screen there. For Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Today's sea ice analysis, filling in here in the Chukchi Sea from what was shown yesterday. And you can see it almost pinching off here right through this area. Also increase in the sea ice, actually a notable increase in the sea ice in Norton Sound from what was shown yesterday. And also here, looks like it's getting pretty close there to the west side of St. Lawrence Island, and continued growth in the forecast for the next several days. Coastal water forecast, storm warnings tomorrow, south coast, 50 knots from the south, seas 20 feet, southeast 45 in Clarence Strait with 13-foot seas, southeast 40 for Stevens Passage, 8-foot seas, so good gales coming into the inside waters, south 30 Lynn Canal seas at 6 feet, and 40 to 45 knot winds on the north coast. Outlook for Tuesday, southwest 25 to 30 on the north coast, seas up to 20 feet and a little higher here on the south coast where the winds will be west-southwest at 30 knots. Small craft advisories, Clarence Strait, south 25 Stevens Passage, and 15 knot winds for Lynn Canal. Prince William Sound, east 20 knots, seas 4 feet, southeast 25, 13-foot seas for the eastern North Gulf Coast. East 20 knots, 12-foot seas for the western North Gulf Coast. Barren Island, southeast 25, 10-foot seas. Pretty good gales, strong gales, actually Kamishak Bay northeast at 40, 14-foot seas and 35 knots southern Cook Inlet. Northern Cook Inlet, north 25, seas 7 feet. For Tuesday, lighter winds east or variable at 10, seas down to 2 feet, but now westerly gales south of the Forelands, southern Cook Inlet. 40 knots out of the west, gales for the Barren Islands for westerly winds at 35, and west turning southwest here at 30 knots for the North Gulf Coast, seas up to 18 feet. Light south winds at 15 for Prince William Sound. Bristol Bay, south 15 tomorrow. Gale force westerlies blowing across the Alaska Peninsula, seas 15 to 20 feet, and then southwest turns south at 30 knots there for the east side of Kodiak, southwest 20 for Shelikof Strait. And then for the day on Tuesday, east side of Kodiak, 45 knots out of the west. Definitely probably some storm force gusts coming out of the bays there on the east side of the island. West 40 for Shelikof Strait, Sitkanak to Castle Cape, 40 knots out of the west, 21-foot seas, 35-knot winds on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula, west 30 on the Bering Sea side. Anyway, west 30 to 35 for the Alaska Peninsula, minimum gales, 14-foot seas for Bristol Bay. Northwest or west-northwest 30 knots for the Fox Islands, seas 15 to 21 feet. And northwest 25 with seas 13 to 19 feet for the Central Aleutians, and winds diminish as you head west down to 15 knots out of the north from Kiska to Shemya. And for Tuesday, west-northwest 15 to 20 out there for those western zones, Adak and Atka northwest 20, and west-northwest 20 to 25, so lighter winds in store for the eastern Aleutians. And for the southwest coast, tomorrow, good north winds, 25 knots from St. Lawrence Island and the southwest coast, 35 knot winds with 10 to 12-foot seas. Northerlies 30 knots for St. Paul, St. George, and St. Matthew Islands. Tuesday, north 15 for Norton Sound. Bring up to 30 knots for St. Lawrence Island, seas 9 feet, small craft advisory southwest coast for those northwest winds, northwest 20 for the Pribilofs and 25 knots for St. Matthew Island. And up along the central, eastern Beaufort Sea coast, northeast at 15, and brisk wind advisories here for the west side, northeast 25, and gales from Cape Beaufort to Cape Thompson, northeast 35 knots, seas 9 feet, the Chukchi Sea, northeast 20 with 5-foot seas. And the outlook for Tuesday, north 30 knots here for the Chukchi Sea, 10-foot seas. Gales continue from Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort. Brisk wind advisories continue for the western coast. Light winds or northwest or northeast 15 central coast, and then turning east at about 20 as you head eastward there toward Demarcation Point. For tonight, again, break this evening after that trough rolls through the Panhandle, and then after midnight and on toward morning, wind and rain on the increase again. This front, though, in this portion, pretty weak, and so just light amounts of precipitation, mostly along the coast, and more so back here over the southwest, and even more than that in Bristol Bay with a couple of low centers here. And high surf advisories continue for St. Lawrence Island through tomorrow. And for tomorrow, again, the storm force winds and rain heavy at times with that frontal system. Cold air plunges southward again over the eastern Bering Sea. Snow chances pretty good for southern Alaska.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.